Okay, so this is what I wear on a standard day plein air painting. Clothing first. Beanie keeps me warm. The cap, absolutely essential for keeping the sun out of your eyes. It's not a good idea to wear sunglasses when you're plein air painting. When you're walking between spots, that's fine, but when you're actually painting, judging colours and tones, it can be quite difficult with sunglasses, so I wouldn't recommend those. A peak cap though is incredibly useful. When you're working and the sun's coming into your eyes, you can obviously pull it down a bit more so you're just peeking out from under the visor. If the sun's coming in from the side, you can also go a bit hip hop and pull it around to about here or something, just to get that bright glare out of your eyes. So I'll never go out without my cap. It's to me it's a completely essential part of my plein air painting setup. So moving down, I've got a windproof, showerproof, breathable jacket. It's got these sort of Velcro things on the cuffs. It's got a hood. It's not hugely insulated, but the fact that it's windproof means it keeps the majority of the cold out. So I rely on my base layers really to keep me nice and warm. In winter that will be like a long sleeve merino wool, and in summer it will be just a short sleeve t-shirt. Now you'll notice everything I'm wearing is black, and there's a good reason for that. When you're working, and specifically when you're working when the sun is coming towards you, there can often be so much reflected light from the sun bouncing off your body back onto your painting surface that you see a huge amount of glare. I've painted in white t-shirts before, and when the oil paint is wet, the shine, the reflected light from your white t-shirt is so overwhelming. The glare back at you off the wet oil paint means you can hardly see the painting. You can't judge colours, and it's very, very difficult. Similarly, if you wear a coloured top, I used to have a very dark bluey green jacket that I used to wear. One day I went out and was painting with the sun coming towards me. I didn't realise that it was throwing this green-blue colour actually onto the board. But because the palette was flat and the board was up here, the palette didn't get any of this coloured light, reflected light. The painting did. So I would look at the scene, mix my colour, and it looked fine on the palette. I put it on the board and it looked different, and it took me about half an hour to work out what was going on. But it was so cold I had to keep the coat on, so I just kept painting, and when I finished the painting I took it off the easel and moved it so my jacket wasn't reflecting colour onto it, and it was a completely different hue. So it had a huge effect. So all the clothes you should wear when you're out painting, on the top half should be black. It will help you a lot. Trousers, obviously it doesn't matter because you're not going to reflect onto the work. Moving down, these are Gore-Tex trousers. They're windproof and showerproof. They're light, they're tough, they're breathable, and they're very comfortable to walk in and wear all day, and extremely light. They've also got vents down the legs that I can open up when I'm hiking up coast paths. It lets some of the heat and the moisture out, which is great when you're lugging a huge heavy bag around all day. So these trousers are excellent. In winter, of course, I wear long merino wool leggings underneath these. Down to my shoes, these are Bracer leather walking boots. It's probably one of the best investments I've made as far as clothing goes. If you're walking for 8 to 9 hours in a day, standing up all day, you need really quality footwear, and these leather boots have just been absolutely fantastic, completely waterproof, very sturdy and exceptionally comfy. They were quite expensive, but if you're an outdoor sort of person, you might have a lot of this gear already, to be honest. But you have to accept that everything's going to get covered in paint. That's just a hazard of the job. So, onto the bag. So this is just a low alpine hiking backpack. I think it's about 35 litres or something. I didn't know that all my stuff was going to fit when I bought it. I just hoped it would. Luckily it did. And you can see I've got my tripod on the side, and I've got my water bottle on the other side, and I've got my wet carrier on the back, and everything else is internal. I'd say fully loaded for a standard day, I'd say that's probably around 15 kilos. So it's not super light, but it's also bearable for a day, and that's the absolute bare minimum of gear I need, probably 15 kilos. So when I set up, this is what I do. Bag goes down, clips off. I'll set my wet carrier aside, more on this later. So in the top of the bag, I've got my factor 50. Very, very important to take this when I'm painting in the summer. Back of the neck is a real killer. Most of the time I'm covered up, but arms and back of the neck and face, when you're outside all day in the sun, 7-8 hours, you get burnt very easily, and I'm an easy burner, so factor 50 something. Some Nurofen. Sometimes you start getting headaches and tiredness, and you need those to keep going. I'll put my lunch in here as well if I bring it. Most of the time I just buy it somewhere. Stick a couple of bananas in the top, that's always good. So, tripod. This is the first thing that goes up. This is a Manfrotto. I've used a couple of tripods before. I started with quite a cheap one, which soon came apart, disintegrated and broke, so I invested in this. I think it's about 150 quid tripod, maybe I got it for about 80 in a sale. It's carbon fibre. It's actually heavier than my cheaper tripod, but that's because it's made of quality components, and it's held up for years and hasn't broken. Really, really pleased with it. So it's got that good balance of strength, weight, and durability. You can see it's absolutely covered in paint. It's got a nice sturdy head on it that can lock, and these legs can actually angle out, if I can remember how to do it. They can actually angle out more and go incredibly wide for very windy days, which is really helpful. I just keep it on this setting. This disgusting thing is just an old bed sheet that I've clipped around here with cable ties, and this acts as a hammock to keep my medium in and anything else that I need access to. So, extend the tripod. And I'll have made sure that whatever spot it is that I set up on, I've got enough room to put this down. Some people use French easels, but they've got a very large footprint. They go way out in front of you. Tripods have a very small footprint. You can tuck yourself into small spaces, which I find very, very useful. So it's got this telescopic hole on the top. I usually bring it up a couple of inches, clamp it. Water, obviously, absolutely essential if you're out all day. This is about 1.5 litres, this bottle. Found this on Amazon. It's the perfect amount for a whole day, I found. 2 litres is a bit overkill, 1 litre is never enough. 1.5 litres seems to suit me perfectly. Normally down to the last sip at the end of the day, which is always quite strange. But yeah, I mean, everything here is completely essential. If I forget any one part, I have to go back for it, or I'll have to buy a replacement. So they're all completely essential in their own way. My ruler, more on this in a bit. Rags for cleaning brushes. Painting medium brush washer. And last but not least, painting box. So let's move this out of the way. I'll normally just put the bag under the tripod or lean it against it. On the bottom here you can see this metal plate. You fix this plate into the base of your Porchard box or whatever painting box you've got, and then it's got a threaded hole in the centre into which you can screw this mounting plate that clips into the tripod. Some tripods, the cheap ones, just have a thread sticking up which will screw straight into this plate. More expensive tripods have these removable shoes, so that I've screwed straight into the plate, and that's absolutely solid. There's probably some thread lock on that, that's never coming off. These metal plates you can find online. I got this from Ken Bromley Art Supplies, I think I got the box from there as well. So here's the contact point for this. You notice also this isn't, it's recessed back, it's not set in the middle, and the reason for that is when the lid's up, the centre point, the balance point, is back from the middle, it's back here, and you'll probably see that when it's open. Don't make the mistake of just putting it in the middle, because there'll be a lot of stress on the plate. You want this to be right in the middle of the balance point of the board when the lid's open and there's a board on it. So that's going to be the centre point. That's it. Very, very neat. Very sturdy. So I'll pop the lid up, do the bolts up. Now I normally give it a little tilt, and then I can slide this up. Now inside are all my paints. So I've got every single colour, and I've also got a couple of extra tubes of the ones that I go through a lot, or if one's getting near the end of its life, I'll always bring an extra tube. So all my colours are there, my brushes are there, tied up with rubber band. I've got 4 bulldog clips and a palette knife. The other thing that's in the painting box is this small little dipper for my terps, which just sits in next to the brushes. So this goes on the side. This L bracket is something I've made a few modifications to this. So this L bracket is something I screwed into the side, and this holds my terps dipper. So that slides on. So, another modification that I made to this box is these 2 grooves here. This is a 12 by 10 box, so here's a 12 by 10 board. This is a spare board that I keep in the back, and I keep it facing away because I don't want any paint to get splattered onto it, so the surface is protected. This is another 12 by 10 board, MDF, that I've just cut these notches out of. And the reason I've done that is to save weight, because we're not going to be painting on this. This is just to hold boards, so we don't need this extra middle bit. So I cut it out, and I cut this bit out, and it's a weight saver, but we've still got the rigidity with this bar in. I've also glued a very simple strip of MDF onto here, and you'll see how this works in a sec. And we've also got some very small bulldog clips. Okay, so this goes in the front groove, and this lives in here all the time. So if I happened to be painting 10 by 8, I can use this groove here to rest the board on, and I can then clip that onto the base of there and use this smaller clip anywhere along this top. I like to do it in the corner just to keep it out of the way. So now I've got an 8 by 10 board on a 12 by 10 wet carrier, and I can paint the entire board. If I was to paint on a 12 by 10 and not use this, as you can see, the grooves mean that you can't paint to the edges. So if you want to frame a picture and there is no rebate on the frame coming over the edge, if you use a tray style frame, you won't be able to paint to the edges and you're going to have to trim your board down. So I don't want to do that. I always want to be able to paint the entire surface of the board, which is why I use this. So because we've got this shelf here, this little rail, we can do anything really. I mean, we can paint portrait, we can paint landscape. It's incredibly useful. So that's an 8x10. Here's my wet carrier. This is an 18x8 wet carrier. So this is all homemade. It's just MDF with these corner bits on. It's very, very light, pretty strong. Little carrying handle and a very simple lid just with a rubber band to keep it on. So here, that's an 18x8 board. You can see inside it will hold 1, 2, 4, 6. It will hold 8 boards, 6 of them back to back, and then one facing in that way and one facing in that way. It's absolutely essential if you're doing more than one painting in a day to have some way to bring the paintings home without smudging them or them getting wet or scuffed or damaged or anything. So I've made wet carriers in a huge range of sizes: 14x12, 16x12, 20x24, 18x8, 16x7, 8x10. I've made probably about 6 of them. This is the one I use most often. It's 18x8, but because it's 18x8, I can also take 8x10s, which is incredibly useful. So 2 different size boards in one carrier. Now, as useful as this is, it does have its limitations. So when I want to paint wider, the 4 bulldog clips that I showed you before, these will go at a very slight angle on the case lid. All goes up to meet them, one there, and then one underneath, again slightly angled. There you go. Wind won't get that off, he says. That's pretty sturdy and incredibly versatile, and obviously you can imagine this board could be much longer. It can't be much higher because we need to grip it, but it could be wider. This is a 17 by 14. If I was to paint on this, I can rest it here, and with the 3rd clip, I can pull this up behind it, clip there, and just at the top, and you can see it's still held in. And then we've got a 17 by 14. So it's hugely versatile. It may only be advertised as a 12 by 10 box, but in reality you can do, well, as you can see, a huge range of sizes. So there's the box, there's the gear. Just get these out of the way. So let's say we're painting 8x10, board goes on, bulldog clip goes on, and then we need our brush washer. This little hook here, this bracket, this comes with the case. This holds the carry strap, which I never use. I just put a climbing carabiner through it. That holds the brush washer, so you've got easy access to wash your brush right next to the dipper for the medium. And there's the hammock, so I've got easy reachable access from my medium. My rag, there's another little bracket there. All I do, there's no fixing really, I pull it through and it stays, and that's it. So, you may have seen this in various episodes of Thoughts on Painting. This is something I designed, developed, created, whatever you want to call it, called, I don't know, I mean it's a ruler really, isn't it? A ruler, or is it a marl stick? I think it's a marl stick. Apologies for that, not knowing. All this is a strip of aluminium with a hole drilled in the end, a bolt fed through, 2 nuts, rubber band wound around it and glued, and the rubber band acts as a sort of cushioned grip. And all I do is hold it against there, and now I've got a pivot point where I can do horizontal lines or any amount of angles, and it's incredibly useful for horizon lines. If there's one thing you want to get properly horizontal, especially in a close painting, it's the horizon. If you have, I mean, you can get away with murder with the rest of the mark making because natural forms can be, you know, they're often not dead straight, but if there's one thing that's dead straight, it's the sea on the horizon. So I'll often use this to get that crisp line for the horizon. But I use it not just for that, I mean I use it more as a brush guide. When you're working on bigger work and you want to keep your hand steady, some people will put their little finger on the painting. Another thing I do, I can spread my fingers out like this, like a snooker player, and I can rest this arm on the back of this hand, and I can work like this. Or I can simply lay that on and rest the little finger here and do that. So it's a very simple but very, very versatile tool, and obviously it can be hooked on the base if you're doing lampposts or something. Yeah, I mean it's very, very useful. It's easy to rely on it too much, and one criticism I would give of it is that if you overuse it, it can take some personality and character out of the work. If you've got these incredibly straight and crisp lines, but for sometimes you just really want that. The mast of a boat, for instance, that's a classic one that I always use this for. I sharpen the end of all my brushes with a pencil sharpener, so I can scratch through the paint into the against the board and scrape the board off. So I'll often put the mast of a boat in with the end of the paintbrush, and you can go back in with the rigger into that groove and put a white line. So it's very useful for that. But as you'll see in my videos, it gets used a lot just to, you can turn it as you do a stroke and do curves. It's I mean it's been great. It's not essential, but it's just something that evolved as part of my working practice, and I enjoy using it, and I see no reason to stop really. So there we go, that's all my gear. We'll talk about colours in a moment, but I just lay them out left to right, lightest to darkest. It's very, very simple, and that's the kit. So packing up, you know, it's very simple, and it's probably quicker than setting up. Everything folds down just as it came out, slides back in the bag, and you're off again looking for another spot. So, my painting surface. I like to use 2mm MDF. I buy it online, pre-cut, in packs of 50 or 25. I like MDF more than canvas or plywood because it's so incredibly smooth, it's very light, it's very strong, and it's a wonderful surface to paint on. You get the full history of the brushstroke, is how I like to think of it. You see where the paint went on all the little hairs as they spread out, and you get the full dynamics of a brushstroke, whereas on canvas, because it's dimpled, you often lose that. So I think it's a very expressive surface, being so smooth, and especially for small paintings I think it works very well. So the first stage is to prime it. I use this stuff, Thixotropic Alkyd Primer, which is a long name. All it is white oil paint with an alkyd drying agent in, just like liquid. So it speeds up the drying significantly as opposed to just painting with white oil paint. I do one very thick coat and leave it flat for at least 24 hours, maybe 36, and it'll the surface settles down completely flat, just as flat as the MDF. You only need one coat, but like I said, it does have to be thick. I much prefer this to acrylic gesso, which is what the majority of people use. Gesso seems to have like a tooth to it, which almost feels like it's gripping the brush sometimes. This is completely different. It's very slick, it's very smooth, it's a very easy surface to work on, and I like that a lot. I leave 5 to 7 days really for this to dry with this one thick coat. One way to test that, if you just push your nail into it, if it dents, it's not dry, so make sure it's solid before you go to the next stage. The next stage is staining. So I use this mid-brown colour, which is the mixture between burnt umber and ultramarine, about 50-50 of each. And this gives a lovely sandy, earthy colour and a nice mid-tone, which is almost exactly the same as the MDF tone. And this is a wonderful starting point for any painting really, especially outside, because this doubles up as it can look like earth, it can look like brick, it can look like concrete, and it can show through the painting as you're working if you leave gaps. Working straight onto white is a bit of a nightmare really, and the gaps in the brush strokes, you don't want pure white showing through. Starting on a mid-tone makes it far easier to judge tones and colours as you put them down. You don't want to go too dark though, because any transparent colour you put on will be affected by the darkness below. Transparent colours look far better on lighter grounds. Okay, so let's talk about medium. I probably get more questions about this than anything else. It's a very personal thing, medium. It takes quite a lot of experimentation to find out what you're really comfortable with and what you like. I've tried many different types of medium over the years, pre-made ones, pre-mixed ones. I've tried just with turpentine, I've tried painting just with linseed oil, I've tried mixtures of both, I've tried pre-bought ones, I've tried liquid, I've tried all sorts of things, and all of them for some reason or another didn't quite suit me, so I've abandoned them at numerous stages. What I've ended up doing is creating my own, which means I can control every aspect of what goes into it and I can get something that works for me. So the first ingredient is a decent, proper distilled turpentine. Please don't use white spirit to paint with. It strips the oil paint of its. It breaks the bond really in the oil that's in the oil paint, just like soap does when you wash your hands and gets grease off. White spirit is designed to break down oil and grease, so it ruins the paint really, and if you use too much, your paint may dry and flake and crack and even fall off if you're too liberal with it. Turpentine's different. Turpentine's made with pine resin, so it comes from a gum and it works with the oil in the paint to create a natural chemical bond after it evaporates. So it's very paint friendly. It can be expensive. It can be £30 to £35 a litre for the really top stuff, which is the same as single malt whiskey when you think about it. You don't have to spend that much, and I buy mine in large quantities like this, 2.5 litres, which brings the price down. But it is worth using this over white spirit. So ingredient 1, turpentine. Second ingredient, cold pressed linseed oil. This is really good stuff made from the same flaxseed that you can eat, so it's very high grade. I buy it in litres. I buy everything in the biggest tubs I can because I go through so much. It's more cost effective. Linseed oil creates that lovely, oiliness. You don't want to overdo it because really with medium, you're trying to strike a balance between viscosity and dilution. So it's getting the balance of these that you're going to have to experiment with yourself to find something that works for you. And the third ingredient is this little bottle, which is a cicative, and this controls the drying rate, speeds it up massively relative to how much you use. So the method I've ended up with is I use this disgusting looking shot glass to measure out my quantities to put into here. This is just an old tin. I bought this empty from an art shop and use it to put my homemade medium in. So you can buy these empty, a couple of quid, and they have a non-leaking seal, which is very important. So my final recipe after years of experimentation is 7 parts turpentine, 1 part linseed oil, and between 5 and 8 ml cicative. That means the painting will dry touch dry within 24 to 36 hours, but it's not so fast that the paint will actually start drying on the palette, which will happen if you overdo it with this. It's that powerful. So that's my medium. I'm very happy with it, and like I said, it strikes that balance between dilution and viscosity, which is a personal thing. So you should experiment. Maybe you want 3 parts turpentine to 1 part oil. Maybe you want more cicative, maybe you want it to dry quicker so it acts more like acrylics. That's the beauty of using 3 different ingredients independently of each other. You get to control each aspect. Okay, brushes. Brushes, again, like everything in painting, highly personal, highly subjective. The brushes I like, I buy all of my brushes from Rosemary & Co. online. They are consistently brilliant in their quality and their service, their postage. Everything arrives on time. They've never seemed to run out of stock of anything, and they have a huge range of very high quality brushes for all sorts of painting applications. I've been through hog, I've been through acrylic brushes, synthetic ones, mongoose hair, sable. I've tried everything over the years, and the ones I've settled on are relatively new actually. They are a synthetic hair, but they're actually quite thin, and they've got a wonderful flex to them. They're called Evergreen, and they're from Rosemary & Co. The bristles are actually green. And I use between size 0 up to about a size 10. I mean, that's about as big as I go. I don't paint very large. But they're all filberts, which is that round tongue. I do use a few flats, just a few. I'm not a huge fan. I much prefer a filbert. I find them more versatile. So you can see here the sort of different sizes. That's a 0, that's a 10. But they're lovely brushes. They've got just that right amount of spring, and they're durable. I find hog is a bit too harsh. I find the bristles are too thick, they're too stiff. These are just perfect. Sable is far too fine, not durable enough, and clogs easily. These are just wonderful. These ones with the sort of two-tone on the hair, these are actually mongoose hair. They're very soft, and I used to use them a lot, but they're incredibly expensive. They're about twice the price of these evergreens. But for blending, which I don't do a lot of, but when I do, I'll always reach for one of these mongoose hair brushes, as they are wonderful for blending. They're so soft. I go through a lot of brushes, so I end up spending a lot, but I do fastidiously wash and clean them after every single painting I do. There's nothing worse than getting back from a trip and a couple of days later opening your painting box to find 4 of your brushes have gone solid, covered in paint, and you've just bought them. So yes, do try and remember to clean them. So that's it for those, although I do use riggers as well. This one's splayed slightly. I do find riggers incredibly useful for those long straight lines where you want to hold a lot of paint in the bristles. I also hang on to brushes sometimes when the bristles start to splay. It's not an automatic death sentence for a brush if the bristles start to splay apart. You can see on that one that they've begun to go, but that can be used for different effects, such as foliage or trees, or there's all sorts of things you can do with a worn out brush. So always good to hang on to a couple, just because they might come in handy. But it is lovely to use a brand new crisp one. You can see this one's a darker colour. It's very similar to the evergreen. That's also synthetic. This is a goat hair hake. Very good for staining boards, doing big strokes. Wonderful brush, incredibly versatile. And I very occasionally use palette knives to sometimes apply large areas of sky if I'm mixing a colour that I need to be highly opaque and cover a large area. I'll sometimes initially apply with a palette knife and then brush on from there. Okay, brush washing and cleaning. These are fantastic little brush washers. You can get them in most decent art shops and online art supply stores. They are small tins with 2 catches, and there's the lid with a rubber ring seal that runs around the top. I've never had one leak ever. The best bit is this removable sleeve with holes in to when you put your brush in and you swirl it around, it's raised about that far above the base, and all the paint and all the gunk falls through to the base. And there's a bar here where you can dab the excess off, so your solvent stays clear relatively, especially when all the sediment settles, and your brushes get cleaner. And then when you get home the next morning, you come to your brush washer, you take this out, you tip this into a jar, and you're left with sludge. You wipe out the sludge with tissue, put your sleeve back in, and then refill with the solvent of your choosing. In my case, I use Zest-It, which is made from oranges. I used white spirit a lot because it was so cheap and it's so effective at cleaning brushes, but it's really not very good for you, white spirit, and if you get it on your hands, as I did all the time, every day, it can actually give you health problems over time. So I switched to Zest-It at great expense, because something like this, 2.5 litres of white spirit, is probably a £5. This is 40 quid. So it's a lot more expensive, but it smells far nicer and it's far less harmful. So good stuff for cleaning brushes. You can also use it in medium if you want to as well, although I personally think turpentine is better. As far as cleaning brushes go, I used to use blue roll or kitchen towels. These days I use old t-shirts. Cotton is highly absorbent, and rags, if it is raining or it's humid or very damp, rags don't fall apart like tissues do, and they don't blow away in the wind like tissues do. Rags are heavy and they hold a lot of paint, and they last until they go solid, basically solid with paint, and then you chuck them. So I would recommend an old t-shirt, perfect for cleaning brushes. When they do get very dirty, sometimes you're wiping paint back onto the bristles, so I do like to take a small amount of tissue just to get the brush extra clean, but for general use you can't beat them really. Right, colours. As you can see, there's quite a lot of tubes. There's 13. Now, I've always used Winsor & Newton. I think the quality to price ratio is generally very good with them. These are the artist quality versions. I have used the Winton or student quality ones, as they're also known before, which are fine if you're learning, but if you really want that punch in the pigment, these are the ones to go for, and a little goes a long way with these because they're so powerful. So from left to right, let's just name them. Titanium white, bright, a warm white. This I mix myself. I use empty tubes like this, which you can buy from certain art shops, and I put a mixture of titanium white, bismuth yellow, cad yellow deep and cad red, and I'll put that into one of those tubes, and that's what you get. It's very similar to Naples yellow, but it's more opaque, and I get to control the warmth of it, which is lovely. And I prefer, if I can, to use as few pigments as possible. So this is really just a shortcut, because I found myself mixing this sort of warm white colour a lot, and it's a lot easier when you've got limited time and you're painting plein air to reach for a tube. So we're not adding a pigment, we're combining these in one empty tube and taking it with us. So moving down, bismuth yellow. This is a very, very bright sort of electric yellow, bordering on acidic. I like my bright colours to be really, really bright, because you can always go down. You can never increase saturation of a colour, you can only reduce it. So I think it's better to start with as bright a colour as possible. Moving on, cad yellow deep, very powerful orange. Cadmium red, wonderful, wonderful, powerful red with a lot of punch. Permanent alizarin crimson, very transparent, very different to cadmium red. Cadmium red is opaque, alizarin crimson is very transparent and is a more of a purpley red. Sap green, so many people seem to have a problem with this, I don't see why. It's very useful. Again, it's almost a shortcut colour, I guess you could call it. Good for foliage. Viridian, absolutely essential, wonderful mixing colour. Going on, cobalt blue. Sort of, I always think of sky blue when I think of cobalt blue. It's just a very, very pure, bright blue. I probably use this least out of any colour, actually. I do prefer mixing ultramarine. I find ultramarine is far more versatile, and seems to have a lot more punch, and seems to mix with other colours far better than cobalt. Cobalt's highly opaque, ultramarine reasonably transparent, but more punch. Burnt umber, my only brown in the tube. Very, very warm. You should really think of this as an incredibly dark orange, as opposed to brown. Quite transparent, and just a wonderfully versatile colour. If you need to warm something up, a touch of burnt umber. In almost everything. I mean, I add brown to most mixes in some capacity, just to bring that saturation down, just to grey it out a little. Mid. Now this, just like this, is a blend. It's a mix of ultramarine and burnt umber, halfway between them. So on its own, burnt umber is very, very warm. So add some ultramarine, it cools it down, makes it more grey, and then onto black. This again is mixed by me, and it's around 60% ultramarine, 40% burnt umber, and you get a jet black. I don't like Mars black or ivory black. I prefer to mix mine out of actual colour. Again, I think it really helps to keep your pigments as few as you can. Now, if cost is a factor for you and you could only have a limited palette, I would say titanium white, bismuth yellow, cadmium red, Viridian, Ultramarine and Burnt Umber. So that's 5 colours and white. That's a very, very good starting point, and you can mix a huge range of colours just with these. And remember, with these two we can get to black, with these two we can get close but not as bright as this, and with a combination of those and the white we can get here. So they're my colours. They're all artist quality. As I said, there's 13 tubes, so it does take a little bit of time to set them out on the palette, but over the years this is what I've settled on and I'm very happy with it. I think it's worth doing a small demo actually of these mixes here that I've pre-made and decanted into tubes, because it's such a crucial part of how I work really and how I go about mixing. I just want to show you on white just to really bring out the colour. That's Ultramarine, straight from the tube. That's Burnt Umber. That's Mid, which is a mixture of these two. And that's the black, which is 60% ultramarine approximately and 40% burnt umber. So you can see there how much ultramarine can cool down burnt umber, and you could keep going out the other side really. I mean, you could have the black that was cooled down even further to a very, very cool black, which is almost a grey blue. So it's very important when you're painting plein air to try and think in terms of cool and warm, and for me these two colours epitomise those properties more than any other. Ultramarine is so cool and burnt umber is so warm. So if I feel like a mix I've made needs cooling down, I'll often add some ultramarine or some black, because I know it's got a lot of ultramarine in it. But if I don't want to, overdo it, I'll use black, because I know the black I've mixed has got some burnt umber in it as well. And likewise, if I feel like a colour needs warming up, I'll either use something very bright like Cad Red or Cad Yellow Deep, and often I'll use the burnt umber. So you can see the warmth here more graduated in this sort of mid stage, and I use this constantly because black is often too cool, burnt umber is often too warm, and this is just right. So the mid comes out all the time, and I know that it's got this and this in it, so it'll always blend well with them. Okay, so varnishing. I think varnishing really adds to a painting once it's completed, especially if, like me, you use a lot of medium while you are doing the painting, as what tends to happen with that is that the painting dries out a lot and it looks quite matte, quite chalky, and the colours and the tones can look quite dull 7 to 10 days sort of after you've painted it. And there's two ways to deal with that. You can either oil the painting out, which means getting a bit of linseed oil on a rag, maybe with a bit of cicative mixed in, and just massaging the linseed oil back into the painting to give the pigment, the binder that it did have in the tube that got diluted once you used all the medium. So rubbing in that linseed oil will really bring the richness and the tones and the colours back up again. Then you obviously have to leave that to dry before varnishing, or you can go straight to varnish if it's not too dry. And I like to use Damar retouching varnish. People say you have to wait 6 months to varnish a painting. That's not true. If you use retouching varnish, you can do it as soon as the surface feels dry. 7 to 10 days I like to leave it. The reason is because retouching varnish can breathe, so the chemical process of drying that all paint undergoes over 6 months can still take place when retouching varnish is used. So I like to put it in a little plastic pot like that. That's a business card case, if you're wondering. Liberally load the brush and just go for it. You can be very generous with the varnish. You'll see some bubbles appear, but they'll pop and you won't be able to see them very soon after it's dry. So I use plenty, and that's it.